I invite you to stay with me through this service. It's going to be difficult at first, but I hope to guide us into hope if you stay with me. So our reading is a poem that I wrote. It's called A Few Miles from Fear to Freedom, a semi-autobiographical, poetic regret and reset. He says he's from Detroit, close in distance, yet so far from truth. A white Jew lived actually 2 miles north of the border, 8 Mile Road. No M&M rainbow of candy colors. Those 2 miles separated the white ones from the black ones. No, we visited Detroit. Only together, only the safer areas. How is racism safer? Racist adult, struck by the unaware racism of my youth. His mother gave a tour of her youthful Detroit. The Jewish neighborhoods long vacated, swept up in the white flight, escape to Red Lobster and Blockbuster, from black people, redlined and blockbusted. Crossing 8 Mile Road now today is a visceral experience, conflicting emotions of fear and guilt, discomforting feelings of courage and relief. His mother's old neighborhood populated by African Americans. His mother's childhood shul, a Baptist church. The mikvah, bath, in working order, a repurposed baptismal font. The building unchanged, save for a faint Magen David, Star of David at the apex, filtering the Christianity emanating from within. His mother's beloved childhood neighborhood, the scary place of his childhood, into which crossing from freedom to fear was never even a consideration. Now, Detroit has changed, but generations of government-supported segregation still clearly delimit fear and freedom. Opposite poles, completely reversible. Fears of African-American communities still much more than his crossing in the other direction. Black families stripped of rights gifted to whites. Stockpiled and guarded resource bubbles stolen by the suburbs, buried black neighborhoods under rubble. Help does not trickle down when some think they know what you need better than you. Depressed incomes replicated across generations, and white picket fences bequeathed down generations. Repercussions so implacably entrenched, what passes as fair just reinforces divide. African Americans regularly moved from fear to freedom at great cost with immense courage. White neighbors cannot do the same, merely traveling self-righteously past 8 Mile on the journey from fear to freedom. Carrying love and accountability for generations of inquiry and injury. It may only be a few short geographic miles from freedom into fear. But the return trip must consider it has been hundreds of years as well. Beloveds, from my vantage of privilege, it's always just felt great to just accept we are the land of the free and the home of the brave. But I never realized We can only strive to be a land of freedoms if only we are indeed the home of the brave of heart, and the brave of spirit. You see, freedom, it's never pure, but it's rather this ever-shifting point around which humankind, it oscillates and it moves forward and backward along a continuum between anarchy and authoritarianism. And further, the work to move that point into just the right place never ends. There are so many freedoms many of us enjoy, just as many others do not. And freedoms are forever gained and lost. And as my awareness of the complexity of the idea of freedom has come into greater focus, I also understand how the price of that awareness, the price of knowledge, and especially the price of having freedoms at all, is indeed, as they say, vigilance. Constant vigilance to grow and sustain freedoms, vigilant courage and vulnerability to take essential risks, vigilance to catch myself when I choose to rest on laurels or evade responsibility, and vigilance to enact the restorative justice necessary to reverse historic injustices, lest they continue to restrict all our freedoms. For revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival. Those are not my words. Those words were spoken at the Ladies' Anti-Slavery Society right nearby in Rochester, New York in 1852 by renowned author, orator, statesman, abolitionist, and escaped slave, Frederick Douglass. In his speech, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" The fact is, Douglass states, the distance between this platform on which he stood that day in Rochester and the slave plantation from which he escaped, that distance is considerable. He actually spoke on the 5th of July because, as he reminded the crowd, the 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn. Right now, in numerous states where reactionary conservatives erroneously believe somehow that white people are under attack, and they fear a loss of control when there is an honest accounting of our country's racial history, Frederick Douglass's speech would likely be censored or completely banned. Please think about that for a moment with me. The words of one of our most important 19th century American ancestors talking truth to power on a national stage about the fact of our country's dehumanizing his fellow African Americans. That important truth might not be taught because it would hurt white people's feelings or make them look bad. That is unconscionable. Denial of history is just one tactic in the current drive to implement racist policies that deny civil and human rights. In fact, an honest accounting of our history plainly reveals that these current policies, posing as race neutral, are, in reality, if you look at history, direct successors to overtly racist historical policies. They're dressed up to conceal their true intent, but they're just as racist. Now, acknowledging our country's racism, as I'm doing, is not devaluing. Just as saying we never will be a free country is not pessimism. Rather, sustaining falsehoods and delusions while chasing this insatiable, unattainable ideal of freedom, that does consign society to permanent bondage. Now, alternatively, claiming freedom as imperfect and focusing on realities of history As painful as that is, and it is painful, that enables setting achievable goals, leading to realistic, yet also radical and revolutionary action that can bring about the transformative change needed to move that point toward a universal liberty. The government of this country, the U.S., has systematically and forcibly prevented African Americans access to resources and opportunities while facilitating easy access to the same for white people for hundreds of years. Not only does it continue to do so in more insidious ways, but the repercussions of generations of inequality, those repercussions resonate today powerfully, since the machinations of government in collusion with the powerful and advantaged have historically conspired to restrict others from accessing the same. Then there exists today this stratification into privilege and exclusion, which creates inequalities. And as a white person myself, whose ancestors have cashed privilege for years, my ability to, for instance, get a loan to buy a car or drive that car without fearing arrest far outweighs the ability of many of my African American contemporaries who have the additional burden of overcoming those generations of injustice. So as long as some are driven by racist policy into what is effectively debt servitude, held hostage by a capitalism that privileges the few over the many, we're not truly a free country. As long as some are denied basic human rights, we are not truly a free country. As long as Americans are not free to walk down a street if their skin is the wrong color, or children of any race not free to go to school without fearing for their life, we are not truly a free country as long as the powerful and the power drunk, I might add, can hold the country hostage by extreme prejudice and fear-mongering and othering to protect their wealth and dominion and assuage their irrational racist fears. We are not truly a free country. And the tragic irony is that those people in power most often don't understand. They don't understand that if they retain what they consider freedom by denying safety and freedoms to others, they too are not truly free. And with their assumed freedoms being thus tenuous at best, our country falls victim to a destructive desperation to hold on to them. And we witness this desperation when control, or the illusion of control, is threatened. And just this past month, I'm sure many of you saw the January 6th hearings, and we heard the testimony of election worker Shay Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman. I don't know if you noticed the irony of her last name, Freeman. We heard that their human right to live free from fear was stolen by Donald Trump because he feared loss of power and control. And the fact that Ms. Moss's job is actually to protect one of our most valuable freedoms, the right to vote, is yet another tragic irony. So the U.S. is currently dominated by many so desperate to hold on to power, wealth, control, that they're willing to deceive and manipulate to do so. They use means ranging from provoking fear and anger, such strong emotions that lead good people the wrong direction. They use means such as direct violence. They use means such as hiding like cowards behind illegitimate protections, often masquerading as straightforwardly established law. And numerous government officials whose sworn duty it is in our Declaration of Independence given on the 4th of July to protect life, liberty, and property, many in our government are those same desperate few, or collude with the same. So, how do we live our Unitarian Universalist principles? How do we accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions? How can we promote equity, justice, and compassion toward a world community with peace and universal liberty. And those are some of the things in the Unitarian Universalist principles. How can we do that? It's my contention that a more solid foundation must be laid in that one thing that diffuses hate and anger, that renders self-serving domination impotent. And get ready, because here goes the newly ordained minister with that old standby: love. I often feel myself like shouting to the rafters, no, forget love. We don't need love, we need justice. But justice preserves only what love reunites, contends the theologian Paul Tillich. Justice, he states, is violated when another's power of being is rejected. Justice is the form in which and through which love performs its work. And I want to be clear, though, in saying love, I don't mean pacifism. Love isn't always pacifism. It's certainly not surrender, placation, or pandering. In fact, there is no more powerful fight, no more potent and lasting justice than that achieved through the strength of love. And yes, we do need solutions that include specific, targeted, and radical action. But I contend, without a baseline of much more potent, unflinching love, none of these specific solutions will be achievable or effective. The author, Berg, who's a recent ancestor, she recently passed, in her essay, Love as the Practice of Freedom, explains that recognizing the uncontestable humanity in each other requires giving up individual comfort and privileges. I'll add that it also requires confronting violent oppression head-on, as many are forced to do because of this country's foundation in white supremacy culture. Only love, you see, will bring into clear focus for many in the privileged class the realities that they fear to confront and are working to obscure and erase. Ultimately, as Bell Hooks again reiterates, only love can broaden concern to what is hurting the collective us. That's what we need. What I'm suggesting in this love, what I'm suggesting will be a shock to the system of those who are truly fearful. And it will be reflexively resisted by those like me who are comfortable in the status quo and don't want to give up our privilege. So therefore, I must strive to love my fellow human enough to be willing to leave my own safety in order to make the world a safer place. And honestly, if I'm not willing to do that, I don't love myself enough. Unfortunately, the reality is, as the bear is poked more and harder, we will experience this desperately violent reactionary response for a long time to come. The struggle to kill or tame that bear that is racism, that is hate, that is fear, that struggle will see many hurt, many killed. But the good news is, witnessing more reactionary violence as we have means more people are taking action to break that bear than ever have before. That's what's happening. More people are loving bravely. And that gives me hope. Langston Hughes cautions in his poem, Freedom, that freedom will never come today, this year, nor ever, through compromise and fear. So we must not be afraid. I have faith that we can succeed, beloved community, and that faith is not of a traditionally religious nature. It's not that type of faith. I'm a humanist, and I have faith in what I can observe, using factual evidence to come to a conclusion. And the rational facts are that ancestors have achieved more freedom while surmounting incredibly high obstacles. And the facts are that I have personally witnessed successes along the way to even more. Those are the facts. I am referring to faith in the power and ability to love sufficiently to effect change that is progressive and revolutionary enough to sustain a society that is ever moving forward toward more and equal freedoms. That's the faith I'm talking about. And joining together in greater numbers with love, I have that faith that we can succeed, and I hope you do too. Granted, when we leave here today, as that faith fades toward unattainability, and it will, recall the words of bell hooks, that once we choose love, remember, we instinctively possess the inner resources to confront the pain. She reassures us that moving through that pain to the other side, we will find the joy and the freedom of spirit that a love ethic brings. Remember those words. Now, right now, in numerous states where reactionary conservatives erroneously believe white people are under attack and fear loss of control when there's an honest accounting of our country's racial history, Langston Hughes's words and Bell Hooks's words would be censored or banned completely, erroneously called CRT. Think about that for a moment. The teachings of two of our most important 20th and 21st century American ancestors of how to love might not be taught to American youth because it would hurt white people's feelings or make them look bad. That is unconscionable. So when we sit at home alone, screaming about that at the TV, as I do, cursing in the inconceivable, wrong-minded thinking of so many, again, think of the words of bell hooks, Langston Hughes. And I encourage you, look to the many, many stories of people fighting and of people moving from that type of fear to freedom through pain with love. Look to the many stories of radical change that have made and radical change that has and is made and sustained by loving communities of like-minded individuals. So do we, it's rhetorical, but do we as a species have the ability to love as radically as is necessary to move from fear to freedom and to save our world? Well, ultimately, regardless of how you arrive there, I ask you, is there another rational conclusion but to have faith that we do? I have hope for America, not because we're the land of the free, but because I regularly, as I said, witness brave people I respect and love, striving against great odds to move from fear to freedom with faith in humanity's ability to love. That's why I have faith in America. So Frederick Douglass, he referenced Isaiah 59 to that crowd in Rochester, New York, in 1852, to which he spoke. And he reassured them. In Isaiah 59, it says, "The arm of the Lord is not shortened." And he reassured them that the doom of slavery is therefore certain. "Allow me to say this," Frederick Douglass concluded, "notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation." Frederick Douglass said in 1852, "I do not despair of this country." He said, "I therefore leave off where I began, with hope." Imagine at that time an escaped slave talking to a nation saying he still had hope, compared to me today saying it. But please, if you will allow me, Joshua, to conclude with this. The reach of love, it's all-embracing, and its strength is unremitting. I, therefore, leave off where I began, that we can strive to be a land of freedoms only if we are indeed the home of the brave of heart and the brave of spirit.